The Lost Key Part 2. The Silent Library. The city at night was a canyon of light and shadow, a labyrinth of steel that hummed with the invisible electricity of millions of lives. But for Julian Mercer, the city had ceased to be a place where people lived. It had become a mechanism, a vast, interlocking puzzle waiting to be solved. He stood in the shadow of a gargoyle on the cornice of the St. Jude's Cathedral, overlooking the plaza. Beside him, Evelyn Hartwood was wringing the dirty water from the hem of her coat. The escape from the Vane building and the subsequent dash through the subway tunnels had left them both looking like specters. Gray with dust, damp with subterranean condensation, and vibrating with adrenaline. "Midnight," Julian said, checking his watch. The crystal was cracked, a hairline fracture running from 12 to 6. The central library locks its main gates in 10 minutes. The cleaning crews enter at 1. Evelyn slicked back her hair, her eyes scanning the street below. "The cleaning crews are contracted by a subsidiary of Frost's company. We can't be there when they arrive. We have a 40-minute window." Julian looked at the heavy brass key in his hand. It had gone dormant again, the internal gyroscope still, the metal cold. But he could feel a phantom weight, a magnetic pull that tugged vaguely toward the north side of the square. The map they had stolen from the hidden 13th floor was burned into his memory. The second node. The silent library. "You never told me why," Julian said quietly, not looking at her. "Why you? You're not just a historian. You knew about the subbasement. You knew about the key's winding mechanism. Who are you really, Evelyn?" Evelyn paused, her silhouette framed against the glowing clock face of the library across the square. "Elias Vane didn't just leave buildings, Julian. He left a society, the architects of the interstitial. My grandfather was one of his draftsmen. He spent his life trying to find the doors Vane hid. He died in a psychiatric ward, raving about the geometry of shadows. I'm just trying to finish his work before people like Caleb Frost burn it down." It was a rehearsed answer, smooth and tragic, but Julian detected a grain of truth in it. He didn't press further. The wind bit through his damp trench coat. "Let's go," he said. They descended the fire escape, boots clanging softly against the iron. The central library was a Beaux-Arts masterpiece, a temple of limestone and marble that took up 2 city blocks. Massive lion statues guarded the entrance, their stone eyes seemingly tracking the few pedestrians hurrying home. They didn't go to the front door. Julian led them to the west wing, where a sunken garden bordered the periodical's archive. "The window," Julian pointed, "third from the left. The sash weight is broken. I quoted them for a repair 6 months ago. They never approved the budget." He slipped a thin pry bar, one of the many tools in his coat, under the frame. With a groan of protest, the wood gave way. He slid the window up. The smell of old paper, binding glue, and decay wafted out. They slipped inside, dropping onto the carpeted floor of the reading room. The silence of a library at night is heavy. It is not an empty silence. It is a crowded one, filled with the whispered possibilities of a million stories resting on the shelves. The air was cool and still. Shadows stretched long across the rows of mahogany tables, cast by the streetlights filtering through the high clerestory windows. "The map marked the rotunda," Evelyn whispered. Her voice seemed too loud in the cavernous space. "The rotunda is the center," Julian replied, keeping his voice low. "But Vane wouldn't put the door in the open. He liked layers." He pulled the key from his pocket. Immediately, the gyroscope began to spin. A low hum, barely audible, emanated from the metal. The rings inside the cage rotated, aligning themselves with an invisible magnetic field. "It's waking up," Evelyn said, staring at the object. Julian held the key out like a dowsing rod. The pull was stronger here. It tugged him past the circulation desk, past the new releases, toward the grand staircase. They ascended, their footsteps muffled by the plush runner. On the second floor, the rotunda opened up beneath a massive domed ceiling painted with constellations. But the constellations were wrong. Julian paused, looking up. "Orion," he pointed. "The belt is too wide, and Cassiopeia is inverted." "Vane's sky," Evelyn noted. He believed the stars influenced the structural integrity of matter. The key dragged Julian's hand toward the center of the room. In the middle of the rotunda stood a statue, a larger-than-life bronze figure of a woman holding a finger to her lips, the spirit of silence. It's the statue, Julian realized. He approached the plinth. The statue was a masterpiece of Art Deco casting, angular and severe. The woman's robes flowed in geometric folds. At the base of the statue, carved into the marble pedestal, was an inscription. Silentium estate clavis. Silence is the key. Too literal, Julian muttered. He circled the statue. The key in his hand was vibrating violently now, the heat returning to the metal. Look at the book she's holding, Evelyn said. The statue held a bronze book against her chest with her left hand. Julian climbed onto the plinth. The book had no title, but on the spine, there was a small octagonal depression. Jackpot, Julian whispered. He raised the key. The shaft telescope extended again, the intricate teeth shifting to match a lock he couldn't even see. He slotted the key into the bronze book. It fit perfectly. He turned it. There was no click. Instead, a sound like a deep breath exhaled from the floor beneath them. The air pressure in the room dropped suddenly, making their ears pop. The statue didn't move. The floor didn't open. Instead, the shadows changed. The lights from the street outside hadn't flickered, but the shadows cast by the pillars and the shelves began to lengthen, detaching themselves from the objects that cast them. They swirled toward the center of the room, pooling around the plinth. Julian! Evelyn's voice trembled. The walls! Julian looked up. The bookshelves lining the circular walls of the rotunda were sinking. No, not sinking, receding. The walls were rotating, flipping panels revealing a space behind the books. A hidden door, 30 feet high, ground open on the north side of the room. But it wasn't just a door. It was a mouth. Beyond it lay darkness so absolute it looked like solid matter. The second door, Julian said, pulling the key free. Suddenly, a spotlight blinded them. It cut through the gloom from the upper balcony, pinning them against the statue. Impressive? A voice boomed, amplified by the acoustics of the dome. Truly impressive, Mr. Mercer. You have a knack for finding things that don't want to be found. Julian shielded his eyes. Frost. Caleb Frost stood on the mezzanine balcony, flanked by 3 men in tactical gear. They held assault rifles, laser sights dancing red dots across Julian's chest. I tried to be polite at the Vane building, Frost called down, leaning casually on the railing. I offered you a way out. Now you're trespassing, breaking and entering, theft of government property. I could have my men shoot you and the police would thank me. You don't want me dead, Julian shouted back, stepping in front of Evelyn. You need the key, and you don't know how to use it. I have engineers, Frost sneered. I have physicists. I don't need a glorified watchmaker. It's not physics, Julian yelled. It's intent. Vane built these locks to respond to the user. You try to force it and the failsafes trigger. You'll bring this whole building down on your head. Frost hesitated. The silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. Drop the key, Frost commanded. Kick it over to the edge of the balcony. Then we talk. Julian looked at the key, then at the gaping darkness of the open secret door. He looked at Evelyn. Her face was set, her hand inside her coat pocket. Do you trust me? Julian whispered to her. Do I have a choice? She hissed. Run when I say run. Julian held the key up. You want it? Catch. He didn't throw it. He slammed the key back into the bronze book on the statue's chest and twisted it violently in the wrong direction, counterclockwise. The reaction was catastrophic. The gyroscope inside the key shrieked. A pulse of concussive force blasted outward from the statue. It wasn't an explosion, but a wave of sonic distortion. The glass in the display cases shattered. The spotlight on the balcony exploded in a shower of sparks. The floor of the rotunda lurched. Run! Julian screamed. The distortion wave knocked the laser sights off target. Bullets chewed up the marble floor where they had been standing a second before. Julian and Evelyn sprinted toward the open maw of the secret door. "Stop them!" Frost roared from the darkness above. They dove into the hidden passage just as the stone door began to grind shut. Julian didn't stop to look back. He grabbed a lever on the inside wall, a heavy iron switch, and yanked it down. The door slammed closed with a boom that shook the dust from the ceiling, sealing them in. They were in total darkness. "Are you hit?" Julian asked, his voice echoing in the small space. "No." Evelyn breathed heavily. "You?" "I'm fine." He fumbled for his flashlight, clicking it on. They were standing on a narrow stone bridge spanning a chasm. Below them, black water rushed silently. Above, archways of ancient brick spiraled upward into gloom. This wasn't the library's basement. This was something much older. "The old reservoir," Evelyn said, her voice filled with wonder. The library was built on top of the ruins of the 1890 waterworks. Vane must have integrated it. They crossed the bridge. At the far end stood a solitary room, enclosed in glass walls like a greenhouse. Inside, sitting on a pedestal, was a single book. The silent library, Julian realized. It's not the building upstairs. It's this, a library of one book. They entered the glass room. The air here was purified, dry and cold. Julian approached the pedestal. The book was massive, bound in what looked like slate, the pages made of thin sheets of metal. "The Codex of Foundation," Evelyn whispered, reaching out but not touching it. The rumor was that Vane wrote a manifesto, a blueprint for a city that could think. Julian looked at the cover. There was no keyhole. Instead, there was a lens set into the cover. "The lens," Julian said, remembering the empty slot in the first room. "We missed the artifact from the first location. We can't open this." "We don't need to open it," Evelyn said. "Look." She pointed to the spine of the metal book. There were coordinates etched into the steel. Latitude 40.7128 N. Longitude 74.0060 W. Depth -200. "The third location," Julian said. Suddenly, the glass wall behind them cracked. Julian spun around. A spiderweb fracture appeared in the pane. Then another. "Pressure," Julian said. "The air pressure is changing." "No." Evelyn backed away. "Someone is breaking in." Through the murky glass, looking out over the dark chasm of the reservoir, Julian saw lights bobbing. Frost's men. They had found another way down, rappelling from the ventilation shafts of the library above. "They're coming," Julian said. He grabbed the metal book. It was impossibly heavy, easily 50 pounds. "We take it." "We can't carry that," Evelyn argued. "We can't leave it." Julian heaved the book off the pedestal. The moment the weight was removed, a siren began to wail. A mechanical air raid siren from the 1940s that screamed through the cavern. "Booby trap," Julian groaned. The bridge they had crossed began to retract. The glass walls of the room started to slide downward into the floor. "There!" Evelyn pointed to a dark tunnel opening on the other side of the chasm, accessible only by a series of rusted pipes. "You want us to tightrope walk?" Julian shouted over the siren. "Better than being shot." Julian shoved the heavy metal book into his messenger bag, swinging it onto his back. The weight nearly toppled him. He grabbed Evelyn's hand. They ran to the edge of the platform. The bridge was gone. Between them and the tunnel lay 20 feet of open air, bridged only by 2 parallel steam pipes, slick with condensation. Bullets sparked against the stone platform behind them. Frost's team had reached the bridgehead. "Go!" Julian yelled. Evelyn scrambled onto the pipes, balancing with terrifying grace. Julian followed, the heavy bag swinging dangerously, throwing off his center of gravity. He was halfway across when a bullet struck the pipe near his foot, sending a spray of hot steam into the air. He slipped. His leg went over the side. He slammed his chest against the hot metal, his fingers scrabbling for purchase. The bag dragged him down. The black water rushed 50 feet below. "Julian!" Evelyn screamed from the tunnel mouth. He looked up. Frost was standing on the far platform, raising his rifle. Julian gritted his teeth. He couldn't climb up in time. He looked at the key in his hand. He hadn't sheathed it. The gyroscope was spinning frantically, reacting to his fear, to the danger. He jammed the tip of the key into the joint of the steam pipe. "Twist!" he commanded the metal. The key turned. The pipe joint burst. A massive jet of high-pressure steam exploded outward, creating a wall of white fog between Julian and the shooters. "Can't see target," he heard one of the mercenaries yell. Under the cover of the scalding cloud, Julian hauled himself up, muscles screaming, and scrambled the last 10 feet. Evelyn grabbed his coat and hauled him into the tunnel. They didn't stop running. The tunnel was a storm drain, sloping downward. They slid, scrambled, and splashed through muck for what felt like miles. Finally, the tunnel widened and emptied out into a concrete spillway. The smell of salt air hit them. They were at the river. Julian collapsed against the graffiti-covered wall, gasping for air. His bag, containing the codex, lay beside him like a boulder. Evelyn slid down the wall next to him, her chest heaving. She looked at him, her eyes wide. "You destroyed a national landmark," she said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in her throat. "I renovated it," Julian corrected, wiping blood from a scrape on his cheek. He reached into the bag and touched the cold metal of the codex. They had the map. They had the book. But the stakes had just risen. Frost wasn't just chasing them anymore. He was hunting them with military precision. Julian pulled out the key. It was glowing faintly now, a soft, pulsing blue light emanating from the gyroscope rings. It hadn't done that before. "It's changing," Julian whispered. "Or you are," Evelyn said softly. She looked at his hands. Julian looked down. The skin on his palm, where he had gripped the key, was etched with faint, glowing geometric lines. They faded after a moment, sinking beneath his skin. He flexed his hand. He could feel the vibration of the subway train miles away. He could feel the electric current in the street lamp overhead. "The third door," Julian said, standing up and shouldering the heavy bag. "The coordinates. Where do they go?" Evelyn asked. Julian looked out at the dark river, churning under the moonlight. "Depth -200, Julian said. "It's not in the city, Evelyn. It's under the river. The Trans-Hudson Tube. The sealed tunnel?" Evelyn's face went pale. "That tunnel flooded in 1909. It's a graveyard. That's where the third keyhole is," Julian said, his voice grim. He looked back toward the city skyline. Somewhere in that grid of lights, Caleb Frost was regrouping. Julian knew they had hurt Frost's pride, and a man like that didn't forgive. "We need diving gear," Julian said. "And we need a boat." "I know a guy," Evelyn said, standing up, "in the Navy Yard. But Julian, if we go down there, we might not come back up." Julian touched the pocket over his heart, where the key rested. "We have to," he said. "The door is already half open. If we don't finish it, Frost will force it. And if he forces the river, he'll drown the whole city." They turned and walked into the darkness of the shipping yards, the sound of the restless river guiding them toward the next descent.